So last night I was hanging out with some of my friends in this attentional community I'm living in right now. And one of my friends, Nolan, had a book about Buddhism, which essentially just describes the major concepts and learnings and principles of Buddhism. And I'm not, I have not studied Buddhism. It has never been something that has drawn me particularly. But that evening, I had this impulse to open the book at a random page and, you know, receive some sort of divination from the book. I that that yesterday, I was really suffering. I was really in a place of great challenge. I've been doing a lot of shadow work, and it's really opened up a lot of different places in me. Like I've been calling it like it's been stirring up the mud in this pond that I live in, which is this, psychology, and that has created this irritation in my heart that has been very painful, and I've been suffering the last few days. And so I was like, maybe there's something here with this Buddhism book. And I opened the page. When I opened the page that I turned to was the first page of Nirvana, chapter 11. And on that page, it just described how Nirvana is defined. And I'll just read the four, major components of Nirvana, which is one, to have realized and practiced the teachings of no self. The holy life has been lived. What needs to be done has been done. Number two is to arrive at right understanding. The truth of things as they are is known. Number three is to be able to put an end to the cycle of birth and death. Such a person is no longer troubled by birth and death. And number four is to have no fear. And I was struck by that because it felt very relevant to the predicament I had found myself in. I was really aware in that moment that a lot of the suffering that I was experiencing was a result of my identification with a self. That it's only really possible to feel this kind of heartbreaking pain if I identify as having a heart in the first place, having a body, being a person who has memories, who, like there's a lot of assumptions that are required in order to feel this pain. And last night, before I went to bed, I found myself just like totally triggered in these attachment wounds. And I found myself really struggling to sleep, just like so much irritation in my heart and so much shame coming up. And it just really felt unsustainable. Like this is not working for me. And this morning I woke up and I was kind of in a similar space. And sometimes I notice what happens for me is that life will sort of open up a doorway, which, usually opens up a wound in me. That is the doorway. And I'll feel deeply irritated by it. And it gets to a point where I am suffering and if I allow myself to really feel the pain of that suffering, I get to this point where I realize I cannot do it on my own. And so sometimes the lesson is about really reaching out to help and reaching out for friends and reaching out for community and being met from that place. And that happened recently and it was really beautiful and I got some like tremendous amount of support that I really needed. And it really just required me to realize that I need to ask for support. But this time it felt like something different. And what it felt like is the need to ask for support from something that is bigger than me, something that is bigger than this concept of axios, this concept of self. And I realized that sometimes I get so caught up in this experience that I'm having, where it's as though I'm watching a movie and I get lost in the movie, and then I'm sort of like rewinding and fast forwarding the movie in an attempt to escape from the drama that I'm experiencing. And in that attempt, it's like there's no way out because I'm just in the movie, fast forwarding, rewinding, fast forwarding, rewinding. There's nothing that I can do differently from that strategy. And of course, the real obvious choice is to just like remove my awareness from the screen and realize that like, oh, actually, there's a whole world out here, and I can just stand up and walk outside and feel the rays of warmth of the sun and lay down in the grass and be held by the earth, and my experience suddenly changes. But on that note, this morning was just sitting here and just in pain, in suffering, and I asked for help. I asked for support. And for me, everyone has their word that works for them, but for me, it is God. And I said, God, I need your help. I need support. And I called in support from, this God, which I conceptualize as this like something that's bigger than me, that is also a part of me. I called in my spiritual guides, I called in my ancestors, I called in anyone that's here to assist me in my own evolution and my own, you know, understanding of love. And I was surprised because the moment I did that was the moment I started to feel this sense of warmth coming through and around me. And I just kept my focus there. I kept just letting that in. And the more I let it in, the better I felt, to the point where this intense shame and irritation in my heart was no longer here. And I was just letting myself really feel that. Like, what just happened? All I did was ask for support from something that is bigger than me and brought my awareness there. And the moment I did that, my experience completely changed. And then from that place, I let myself speak. And what was said was something so beautiful because it was about devotion. And the word devotion has been such a beautiful and important word for me. And what I am learning is that there is a great distinction of devotion that there is like there is being devoted to an object in there's a devotion to an object and there is devotion to God, essentially. I don't have a beautiful this beautiful way of like laying it out right now, but like there is a devotion to the movie and then there's a devotion to life, reality, God. And when I devote myself to the movie, I'm really limited by the constructs of that movie. It's, I become identified with the movie. And there are limitations because that movie can only go so far. Like there's a clear beginning and end, and there are only a few characters. There's a particular type of drama happening, and that's just how it goes. And that movie is basically another human being for me. I often find myself devoting myself to other human beings. And those human beings are just basically composed of these movies. Their brains are movies. And I when I become devoted to the human, I've really like limited my capacity for love. And so as I was in this space of like really being connected to God, I was feeling the distinction of devoting myself to another person versus devoting myself to God. And that when I devote myself to God, there is something different that happens because instead of me trying to consume something, there's something like I'm calling it devotion, but what it actually is consumption because I'm trying to get something from this other person or from this movie, whatever you want to call it. But when I'm coming from God, from this, which in my understanding of it is this like completely infinite resource, this infinite resource when I'm sort of consuming from that place, which is like I'm consumed, all of my attention is being consumed in within this infinite resource. From that place, it's like the reverse thing is happening where like something is being consumed here and then created, like something unfolds through me, something's created through me. And so when I'm bringing my attention out into the world with other human beings or with just engaging with life, I'm no longer just sort of consuming content. I'm actually creating it, or I'm actually unfolding content. Actually I'm something alive is coming out, is being born, is being generated. And from that place, it is deeply fulfilling because there is not a sense of limitation or lack in that. I am not limited by your wounds. I'm not limited by your psychology. I'm not limited by your movies because I'm not consuming them. I'm consuming something that has infinite potential and possibility. Instead of like saying like, okay, here's this one song, and I'm just gonna like this is the one song that's gonna like really like keep me happy for the rest of my life. Versus saying, here's this Ableton, you know, here's a software that I can create a million, like a billion songs on, and I'm gonna devote myself to the software because my highest aliveness comes from what is constantly emerging. My highest aliveness comes from what is new and is totally in alignment with with where I am, my state of evolution, what is here now. And so instead of just like saying like I need to cling on to this one thing and then it needs to satisfy all my needs, this consumption space, instead it's just like I am devoted to the thing that creates all things. And from that place, I am alive. So I'm feeling a lot of joy this morning as I'm just with this awareness. I feel really grateful for it. And there is this thing called love. And what I've been realizing is that I have no idea what that is. Like I have been relating it to it in a way that is like clinging on to that one song and saying, this is what love is. It's like, yeah, it might be a great song. Yeah, Bohemian Rhapsody, great song. Love it. It's not the only one. And when I hold on to that desperately, like it is, and it needs to be the only one, and it needs to be the one, that's where I find myself in this error of perception that creates a lot of suffering. And at this point, what I believe is that love is the capacity to create. Love is that sense of like absolute liberation that there is so much here that to be totally devoted to love is is one of the greatest gifts because it gives so much as a result. And there is no attachment to what is created. It just is. Yeah, so love is not a movie, love is not a song, love is not a person, and love does not happen through just devoting myself to the song, the movie, or the person. It just does not. That is not love. Love happens. Love is the experience of me devoting myself to this infinite resource that is God and unfolding my my experience from that place and allowing myself to be this magnificent, extraordinary creator. And from that place, letting go of what I know and creating space for the unknown to thrive.